Actually, I'll wait for just a second. Lists are ways we can order the world around. According to Kerwin, lists are familiar. Some lists are historic and public, others personal and private. Lists are comforting and set an agenda. Lists catalog, clarify, inventory, enumerate, and argue. Lists indicate what was done and what needs to happen. Lists are hopes and desires, struggles and labor. Some lists are processes, others outcomes, and some a combination of the two. Lists remember and reminisce. Lists can also promote play, and experimentation, as seen in the work of Richard Serra. In this paper, I use Richard Serra's verb list to experiment with my collections-based research, explore pedagogical connections, and consider what lies at the intersection of conceptual art and teaching. I use a list as a reference point to actions taken during the creation of a collections assemblage, actions associated with and possibly taken by the objects, places related to the objects, and my attributions in consideration of the objects. My research is rooted in objects and thingness. Oh. Sorry, this isn't playing. Okay. I contemplate objects and layers of place, shared histories, and ephemeral connections with humans and non-humans. I created this video, which you can't see, as a way to consider differing ways of thinking about the role and interaction of objects when assembled into and disassembled from collections. As I looked at the objects in my collection, I reflected on a lecture by Anne Hamilton, during which she said that text is like stitching. The act of unmaking is an act of making. This notion of making and unmaking and doing and undoing has shaped the way I see objects in collections and assemblages. In order to make the collection, something else must be unmade. Objects may be removed from another context or possibly another collection. Collections are made, unmade, remade in assemblage after assemblage, recontextualizing the objects with each iteration. I found making a list helpful to consider what collections are and can do. First, I made a list of what was being made and unmade when I arranged the objects in boxes and groupings. I listed associations of what the collections do, where the objects in the collections were found, and who the collections reminded me of: a curiosity, a waterway, a domesticity. After brainstorming a list of what is made and unmade, I riffed off of Serra's verb list. Serra created verb list in 1967-68 as a series of provocations for the artistic process. In this paper-based work, Serra wrote down 84 verbs such as to gather, to cut, and to spill, and 24 contexts such as of tension, of grouping, and of mapping. He wrote the list as, quote, actions to relate to oneself, material, place, and process, end quote. Serra states his verb list allowed me to experiment without any preconceived idea about what I was going to make and not worry about the history of sculpture. I wasn't burdened by any prescripted definition of material, process, or end product, end quote. Serra uses his verb list as a way to balance accomplishing a task while remaining loyal to experimentation and play while doing it. Serra stresses the need for play and remaining deep in the moment of what happens during play. He commits to, quote, make art a practice of affirmative play or conceptual experimentation. Free from skepticism, play relinquishes control, end quote. One of the things he notes is that is problematic in academic teaching is that play is repressed, thereby discouraging the freedom of experimentation. The importance of play is well noted, particularly in early education. Similar to Serra's observation that play relinquishes control, Vygotsky noted that play is a first indication of children's freedom from, quote, situational constraints, end quote. As I made my own verb list, I watched the video, again, to reimagine myself playing with the materials and attempt to free myself from my own situational constraints. To make, to unmake, to separate. I watched the video a few more times to identify any and all actions that I employed to create the collection. While I listed dozens of actions, It is still an incomplete list as I made the list days after the collection was made and unmade, days after removing myself from the deep play of building the collection, and I was unable to fully understand all the actions I was taking, feeling, and thinking at the time, to skew, to imagine, to remember. I returned to verbless creation during the process of writing a joint article for the special issue of Visual Arts Research on Women Art Educators in Higher Education, Conversations on Studio Practice. My partner, Dawn Steinecker, and I traded materials to work with as part of our conversation. As I sifted through the materials I received from Dawn, I added my own materials of found objects and ephemera to merge our objects in a way that is meaningful to me. I again created a verb list to make sense of the objects, this time inscribing a rainbow scratch art paper that was in the materials that Dawn sent. Some of the words from the verb list are included in our resulting article from 2019 and punctuate the text. For me, the verb list was a way to insert myself into the dialogue to provide a different, direct voice. For the reader, the verb list acts as interruption and narration to provide sustained pauses between the dialogue and play. To recollect, to abandon, to resolve. One of the assignments I give my art appreciation students is to consider building a collection as creative practice. Students are to assemble a collection, arrange it, photograph it, then describe the collection. Recently, I decided to fold in another prompt to also create a verb list. Students were asked to identify at least 10 verbs they employed while gathering their collections. Responses were thoughtful and varied. One student collects Kodachrome and Ektachrome slides because they, quote, they are beautiful and show me a world I've never experienced, end quote. To pose, to brighten, to imagine. Another student keeps all of his shoes as a collection, and he positioned the shoes on the staircase to reflect his position in life. To dust, to shine, to climb. A third student saves her old test papers to signify knowledge, and arranging the papers gives her great satisfaction. To comfort, to remember, to pain. One last student saves broken pieces of decorations and jewelry to create something new and enjoys a process of destruction, deconstruction, and creation. To repair, to complement, to surround. The compilation of the students' verb list is impressive. Out of 32 students, there are 188 unique words. Some overlap with Sarah's list, but most verbs stem from their experiences, their experiments, the reflections, their play. To seek, to heal, to prosper. A bonus assignment in my course revisits Sarah's original intent to use the verb list as provocation and instruction for experimentation and play. In this optional assignment, students are instructed to choose 3 to 5 words from any of the provided verb lists, Sarah's, mine, or a compilation of other students, as provocations to explore the artistic process, then share the documentation of their product or process. While few students completed this optional assignment, those that did thought deeply and experimented with the process. One student made a drawing inspired by his selected verb list. To imagine, to contemplate, to create, to release, to display. The verb list revealed in this paper so far reflected on collections and collecting practices and served as provocations for artistic experimentation and play. What happens when a verb list is generated for teaching? I reflected on my last semester of teaching and the actions I took with students, the learning management system that was new to me at the time, and myself, and I also thought about students' actions and reactions with and to me. I created an additional list, one which will be ongoing. I will use this list to reflect on possibilities of curriculum and pedagogy and to build new explorations of experimentation of play in my classes, to engage, to connect, to generate. What would you add to the verb list? Thank you.